Hi, good afternoon. Thanks to Red One and POMED for organizing this event, which of course is very timely. So timely that some of us have had to really rush to try to present some sort of coherent analysis unless we woke up at the crack of dawn. But I will try to offer, I guess, a specific assessment based upon what I think is sort of the president's evasive approach in terms of presenting any sort of world policy decisions. And, you know, as was mentioned, I mean, of course it was a brilliant speech. He obviously had a lot of very skilled speechwriters here in the United States prepping him. And as we all read in the media for many, many weeks now, if you just even examine the language, he talked about how tension was fueled by colonialism, which denied the rights and opportunities of Muslims. He spoke a lot about respect. He used a lot of buzzwords that are very, very important in the context of the Middle East and the broader Islamic world. So he did a lot of homework, and I'm sure, and we've already received, if you look at the internet, there's been a lot of response, very positive response. But what I'm going to try to point out in the next few minutes is how he didn't go far enough. And I think that particularly it's almost his eloquence and his intelligence is almost a curse and a blessing, I think, in the sense that he's raised the bar so high that just in looking at the response, both in Arabic and English, that's come back so far, and in the days preceding this speech, we see that the expectations are so high. So I think that even though he has delivered this very eloquent speech, we are already seeing, not only from Al-Qaeda in Iran, but even from just, public intellectuals, from leaders in the Arab world, that they were waiting for something more. And at the end, I'll read specific comments that I found on the internet, which I share, and which I think are very interesting. So on the first issue, which is very important at the beginning of his speech, he talked about extremism. He said violent extremists have exploited these tensions in a small but potent minority of Muslims. He talked about the attacks on September 11th. And then he said this has bred more fear and mistrust meeting among Americans. So long as our relationship is defined by our differences, we will empower those who sow hatred rather than peace. And then he talked about how there are a lot of similarities and that we shouldn't focus on the differences. Now, I think that sort of the public debate in the Middle East is so far beyond this. I mean, I think that it would maybe have been wise in terms of trying to appease the skeptics, which of course I assume that that's ultimately the point, that he should have talked more about the concern, why extremists have any sort of real constituency in this part of the world, and how those issues can be addressed. Not only political issues, but issues of I guess more moral issues, religious issues, how extremist groups believe that Western societies are basically immoral, how their perception of the world, their view of the world is at odds with Islamic values. So I think on that issue we could have gone further rather than just talk about how there needs to be more emphasis on the commonalities rather than differences. The second topic that I noted was his reference to Islam in America. And this has become a very interesting sort of strategy by the new administration to use the position of Muslims in this country to make the argument that the United States isn't at war with Islam. And again, the president talked about how there is freedom, religious freedom for Muslims in this country, which of course is true. He talked about the fact that there are over 1,200 mosques, that there is a mosque in every city. And again, this is a very interesting anecdote, and it's interesting information, but how does that really answer the question of U.S. policies toward Muslims in this part of the world? And I think that, again, there's a bit of a confusion. It's one, because these two populations are very different. I mean, Muslims in this country are more affluent, more educated than even the average American family. Statistics bear this out. So to try to sort of use the example here to speak to Muslim populations abroad is a very clever and effective strategy, but I think that there's somewhat of a disconnect because these two populations aren't necessarily all that related.